Hi there. Yes, my name is Graeme Codrington, and it's really great to be joining you at the LIASA conference this year in this virtual environment. What a year it's been. And I am going to be looking at the future, at same planet, different world. Yes, at some stage, COVID will be history, and we'll be living on the same planet, or roughly similar. But it's going to be a different world. And I want to share with you today three things. I want to share with you some of the scenario work that our team has done on where we think COVID is likely to go in the next few months and years. Then I want to talk about the lasting legacy of COVID. What is going to be different about this world that we live in post-COVID? And then finally, I want to share what I think are four things that you and your team need to do in order to prepare yourself for whatever is coming our way in the next few years, in the rest of the 2020s and beyond. So let's start with having a look at what we expect for the next few months. This is what I do for a living. This is what our team at our company Tomorrow Today do. We are scenario planners, and we look at disruptive forces that are shaping the world. And obviously through 2020, we've been focused on thinking about the COVID crisis and what's happening in the world at the moment. Unfortunately, it's chaotic at the moment. Different parts of the world are dealing with COVID in very, very different ways. They've got different policies and approaches and different levels of success and failure. I mean, just compare America and South Korea. America has had nearly 250,000 deaths. South Korea, 7. And that clearly has got to do with interventions and policy and choices that were made. Here in South Africa, I'm a believer that we made the right decisions early on. I think that given the state of health in South Africa, the state of the health system, TB, AIDS, and other issues in our system, it was necessary for us to take COVID very, very seriously. And I think we did the right thing by locking down hard and quickly and early. But then I think the government got a little bit lost in some of their regulations, in stopping listening to the scientists and starting to be driven by ideological policies. Where we are at the moment is probably where we are going to stay. I don't think that we are going to move out of lockdown level 1. I think we're going to stay in a level of disruption for quite a while. And unless we get a very unexpected spike in cases, I don't think we'll move up to higher levels of lockdown. I think that the government is now in a space of saying, it's up to you now. Okay, it's up to you to deal with COVID, keeping as much of a lookout for COVID as you can. And we've got to keep doing that until we find either a vaccine or get herd immunity. And neither of those two things, in my opinion, are going to happen anytime in the next 12 months. Yeah, I know there's a lot of vaccine promise. I know that there are a lot of vaccine trials underway. But even if we can speed up vaccine delivery as fast as possible, the best case scenario is to get a viable tested vaccine by the middle of next year. And that's probably not going to happen. It'll be towards the end of next year. And herd immunity will take at least another winter cycle here in the Southern Hemisphere. And so again, we're looking towards the end of next year. This isn't the motivational bit of the presentation, so don't go away yet. But it's important for us to start with a little bit of realistic assessment of where we are. We are not just at a moment of challenge, a little bit of change where we can grit our teeth and power through and then lockdown will be over soon and we can all get back to normal. No, we are at a time of deep disruption, deep structural change to society. It's going to last for an extended period of time. And in this environment, there are no real rights and wrongs, right? So should we try and get back to normal? Yes, of course. But should we do that at the risk of a second wave and everybody's health? No. And don't forget, it's not just about the people who die of COVID. And the medical people around the world are doing a magnificent job of reducing the death rate. It's also about people who get incredibly sick, and that's about 20% of people get very badly sick and might have lifelong lasting medical issues if they get COVID badly. So we still don't want to get COVID, right? So again, as I said, the government has now pretty much put it into our hands, and this is true of most governments around the world. They've said you need to keep physical distancing, you need to wear masks, you need to temperature check when you enter a facility, you need to track and trace as much as possible. And if you get COVID, you need to quarantine. And if you do all of that, we can then at the same time attempt to get back into society, into life as much as we can. Should we send our kids to school? Yes, of course we should. But if there's a COVID case at school, should we close the school for a week or two? Yes, again. Same with restaurants. My favorite restaurant had to close down for a little while because there was just COVID running through their staff, and that's exactly the right thing to do. And that would be the same thing to do in your workplaces, in libraries, in public facilities. If there's a COVID outbreak, we have to recognize that we can't hide that. We can't pretend that COVID isn't a significant problem. We need to quarantine, shut down. If your staff have got children who have to be kept off of school or who are not going to school every day, we have to accept, understand, and support them through that disruption. That, I think, is the reality of our world for 2021. So that's quite a thought for some of you. I hope some of you were sitting down to hear that, because I genuinely think that that's the realistic assessment of where we are. So how should we respond? How should we engage with this thought? I think that there are 4 things that we can do to respond to that. And the first one, unfortunately, doesn't get better. Doesn't get better yet, because I think the first thing that we need to accept is that there are even more disruptions coming our way. Yes, we are not done with disruption. We knew that the 2020s were going to be a remarkable decade of change. And we are heading into a time now where you know the disruptions that are coming. This is artificial intelligence, automation, robotics, machine learning, predictive analytics, data, cloud, mobility, the technology revolution, sometimes called the 4th industrial revolution, is coming our way. Then you can add to that geopolitical change, right? There's still Brexit in the system. We're still dealing with the aftermath of an American election, right? You've got an American-Chinese trade war. Did you forget that was still on the go? You've got India and China having a border conflict. I don't know if that scares you as much as it scares me, but there's a lot of geopolitical stuff going on. And I think local politics in every country around the world, including here in South Africa and Southern Africa, local politics is going to see a huge churning as people, our sensibilities as people have been raised, and we're kind of saying we don't want the world as it used to be. We don't just want to go on with what we had. This COVID thing is causing us to reconsider what we are prepared to accept, and people are becoming activists. I think it's a good thing. We'll come back to that a little bit later. Then add on top of that environmental issues, climate change, global warming, all of that stuff, which I think has the potential to be way more disruptive than COVID. And I hate to tell you this, but I think there are other pandemics waiting to come as well. I don't think COVID's the last one. So, a lot more disruptors in the system. Let me give you a few examples, right? Have a look at this headline over here. This is the UK High Street. I don't know if you know that language. In the UK, they talk about the retail sector, shopping malls, shopping chains, shops on streets. That's called their high street. So the retail sector in the UK lost 140,000 jobs this year. Ooh, that's a lot of jobs that have just gone, except look at the date. That's last year, that's 2019. That's got nothing to do with COVID. A South African example, Standard Bank. I could have chosen other banks, they all did this last year. But back in 2019, early 2019, Standard Bank announced the closing down of a whole lot of branches, firing of, or the retrenching of a whole lot of staff. Thank you, Standard Bank. That's why we've had to stand in line for 3 hours to get into one of your remaining branches during lockdown. But the point I'm trying to make is that this is not a COVID conversation, right? These disruptors have been happening, and they have been happening for years, and they will continue to happen. And if we are stretched, like an elastic band is stretched during this COVID lockdown disruption period, there would be the hope that when you let that elastic band go, boom, everything snaps back to normal. But if you pull an elastic too far for too long, it either loses its stretch or it just snaps. And that's where I think we are. Yes, a few things will snap back once we're finished with COVID. But I think that there is going to be a lasting legacy of many changes to our lives and our world and our work. And I also think that these other disruptors that are in the system are going to just add to a period now, the next few years, which will be a period of deep, deep disruptive and structural change. So, you can't just grit your teeth and get through this COVID period. Some people even said to me recently, well, if we can just get through 2020, hopefully next year will be better. Why? Do any of these disruptors, does COVID have a calendar? Do you think COVID cares about December becoming January? Or what's so special about the new year that suddenly it'll be different? It's not going to be. And so what we need to do is we need to keep our eye on the changes that are coming. I'd like to suggest to you that as you and your team consider this and think about it, that maybe it would be useful to think about these changes in 3 different categories. Here we go. The categories of the world and how the world is changing and shifting. Then the workplace and how our world of work is going to shift. And then finally, communities or society, or if you'll allow me to use another W, how we will change in the way that we interact with our families, our friends, and our communities. We don't have the time in just a short keynote session to do what is probably a good day's worth of strategic thinking. But let me just point you in a direction, and then hopefully you can open up these conversations with your colleagues. And by the way, I will be joining at the end of the session after the other speakers to do a live Q&A. So we can have questions as well through the system. Please put your questions into the chat box now, and we will pick them up and deal with them after all the other presenters have finished. But let me just give you a few ideas. So if we have a look, let's start with the world, a big picture. And I think one of the things that might change dramatically in the world is supply chains, where we get our goods from, imports and exports. That's what I'm talking about. Do you remember March 2020 and the great toilet roll rush. I think that's how history will remember it. It was insane. Everybody going out and hoarding toilet paper. I think it started in Australia. And to be fair to the Australians, they're a little bit more full of it than than the rest of us. So maybe they needed more loo roll. No. That's too cheeky. To be fair to the Australians, their toilet roll, as far as I understand, their toilet paper is pretty much all imported. It all comes from China. So it's probably not inappropriate that they all went off and made sure they had enough toilet paper, because if COVID was going to shut global travel down, and then your imports and exports are going to be disrupted and you can't get toilet paper, that is pretty much a disaster, right? But I live in Johannesburg. We've all got, as South Africans, we've all got friends and family in Australia. So we heard of the toilet paper rush. We didn't bother to check it ourselves, and we went out and got some for ourselves. We didn't need to. Here in South Africa, as far as I know, we've got 5, 6 maybe big toilet roll manufacturers. We were never going to run out of loo roll. And now some of you will never run out of loo roll because you've got a garage full, right? Silly example maybe, but the point is most of us don't know where our stuff comes from. The things that we buy, we don't know whether they're imported or local. And I think we will take a little bit more time to work that out in the future. I also think that a lot of companies and a lot of industries are going to realign those things. I do have a lot of global clients, and they are really seriously already thinking about this. And a lot of companies, and I think a lot of countries, might look at key national resources and say, we need to bring that supply chain closer, make it smaller, onshore, nearshore, whatever the right language is. And that's going to have a huge impact on companies and industries around the world. For some people, it's a threat because their business will go away. For other people, a huge opportunity. But supply chains and regionalization of those supply chains is going to be a big theme, a big trend. There's geopolitics. I've already mentioned some of this, and COVID is an accelerator in the system, I think, of some geopolitical changes. And then, as I mentioned, another example might be climate change. And here, let me give the example of Paris, right? So about 2 months ago now, Paris had a mayoral election, and the mayor, Anne Hidalgo, that is her name, Mayor Hidalgo, was re-elected for another 5-year term. And she is now going to be the mayor of Paris during the Olympics, the next Olympics, the 2024 Olympics, assuming they go ahead. And part of her campaign was to campaign on sustainability, environmental, green issues. And so she has said that she wants to make the Paris 2024 Olympics plastic free. Now, I do have a few clients who will be impacted by this. Coca-Cola, Kraft Heinz, Unilever, Nestle amongst them. And they are panicking at the moment, saying, how is it even possible that in 4 years we can shift all of our packaging and our systems and processes to make sure that we are plastic free by 2024? And Mayor Hidalgo says, I don't care, you're going to do it. She went even further to say, you know what? We saw COVID. We saw that it was a global crisis and emergency. So we used the powers that we had to make very quick and quite harsh changes to society, how people lived. We changed the laws. We locked people down. We did it quickly. We did it effectively. So if we recognize that there is a crisis, if we recognize that there is an emergency in the system, then why can't we do something about it? And she's hinted that the plastic-free Paris might be forever after the Olympics. And why not? Why not? So this is the point I'm making, that I think COVID has accelerated some of the other forces that were already in play, causing our world to change. I wonder what examples you can think of. The second thing to think about is the world of work. And maybe this is the place we should have started, because I think it's possibly the easiest one to think about. Your best and easiest example, and let's not ignore it just because it's obvious, is working from home, right? Most of you have had to work from home for the last little while. Some of you have enjoyed it and you don't know of anybody who's missing rush hour traffic, but some of you haven't enjoyed it. And I get that. You're not really working from home. You are surviving a crisis while stuck at home. And that's a whole different thing. I've worked from home for 10 years, more than that, in fact, and I love it. But I'm set up for it, right? And I'm in an environment where I've got the flexibility that I need. Some of you are working from home but pretending to be at the office, and that's the worst of both worlds, because your home isn't set up as an office and your office doesn't really want you to be at home. So I get that. So I don't think the revolution is work from home. I think the revolution is work from anywhere. Because I think that what is happening, what has happened, I think, is a default setting has shifted. The previous default setting was you have to come to the office unless there's a compelling reason to be away. Or you have to come to the meeting because all meetings are face-to-face. Or we have to have a conference at a venue in a place that everybody comes to once a year or whenever, because that's how it must be done. That was the default setting. Now, I think, because we were forced to change and we realized that we could change, I think now the default setting has changed, where people say, well, you can work from anywhere unless there's a compelling reason to be face-to-face and together, unless there's a compelling reason to come to the office. And I think lots of people are thinking about, well, do I really have to? And are shifting. And it's more than just shifting your geography. It's also shifting your mindset about how we measure your productivity, how we manage what you do, how we shift from an inputs-driven mindset to an outputs-driven mindset. I think there's a lot happening here. And it's not just work from home, work from anywhere, but there's a whole shift in how we even think about work. Does that make sense to you as a conversation to have? What are some of the other things we need to think about in terms of how the world of work works and what people want from us in the future? Great conversations. The final piece, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, is just society, community, ourselves. There are some things that are going to snap back. I know of people who have postponed weddings and celebrations because they want their family, their friends to be there. I get that. But there are things that are not going to change. For example, I am never going to shake hands. I didn't like shaking hands in the first place anyway. I think it's one of the grossest things we do. Hello. It's ridiculous. A lot of people are learning for the first time, oh, we should wash our hands fairly regularly. So, maybe we'll all go a little bit Eastern and do the shoulder bump for the rest of our lives. Maybe a flippant example. Maybe more significantly, though, I think we're going to see stress living in the system. And I think that we are going to be dealing with that for a long time. Talking of stress and medical stuff, I think one of the shifts is going to be a shift to online medicine, right? Telemedicine, if you like. Because previously we would have said, I have to see my doctor face to face. Now we're saying, oh, I don't want to go into the hospital. I don't want to go into the doctor. Doctor, can we meet in a virtual environment? And the doctors are saying yes. And we're finding it works, and the doctors are finding it works. It's great. I hope in South Africa that we continue to have the NHI conversation. I think we now realize how much we need an improvement in our overall healthcare system, because the richest people in South Africa are only as protected from COVID as the poorest people are. We are actually all in this together, and we need to sort out some societal issues. For me, one of the wonderful things during COVID has been to see how people have banded together to help each other, to help the most vulnerable in society. And I hope that that continues. I hope certainly that that will be something that is a good thing that emerges from this COVID crisis. So I could go on and on, as you can see. But this is the first thing I think that we need to do. The other three things don't take as long, by the way, if you're checking your watch. But the first thing that we need to do to respond to where we find ourselves is we need to expect and anticipate more disruptions and understand the lasting impact that COVID is going to have. It's not going away anytime soon. But that now leads me to the second thing that we need to do, and that is we need to find our COVID pace. Let me explain what I mean by that. I've been running for a number of years. I started running about 5 or 6 years ago. I was never a sporty kid, but as I got into my 40s, I realized that the waistline wouldn't look after itself. And running was a really cool thing to do as I traveled around the world, just a pair of shoes and some running kit, and I could run through cities and fell in love basically with it. And I quickly got to 5Ks, 10Ks, even doing 21Ks quite easily. So I decided to push myself to do a marathon. And I managed to get an entry to this year's 2020's London Marathon. I was so excited. My first big international marathon, 42 kilometers. And I asked seasoned runners, as I prepared for the London Marathon, I asked seasoned runners what their best advice for me was. Now, if you are a seasoned runner, you will know the advice that I was given because everybody gave me the same advice. No exceptions. So you'll know what that advice was, right? Don't start too quickly. I wish I could have run the London Marathon. It was cancelled because of COVID, but I knew what they meant, right? I was as fit as I'd ever been. I was excited. I was ready to go. It was due to take place in April. I'd done all the preparation. And if I'd been able to run it on the day, when the gun goes, you've now got crowds around you, people cheering, music, other runners. You rush out with adrenaline pumping through your veins. And maybe you get through the 10Ks, 15, 25Ks doing really well. But the seasoned marathon runners told me that a marathon really only starts at about the 35 kilometer mark, at about 21 miles into the race. Because if you've used up too much energy at the beginning, your body literally says no more. And you hit what they call the wall and you literally can't run further. And so you've got to pace yourself. That's what I was most focused on in my training. Finding my appropriate pace. I think we've got a problem with COVID. I think that too many of us have been running too hard and too fast in COVID. It's not a criticism, right? Some of us have had our jobs at risk. I lost all of my clients at the beginning of the year. They just cancelled every event and everything was postponed or cancelled, and I lost everything. And I had to just get in there and do whatever I could to try and make work happen. Even if you've kept your job, you might feel under pressure to do more work. You might not be getting that balance right with working at home and not being able to switch off from work. Many of us are struggling with stress. We're not sleeping. It's been a rough year. And if we don't look after ourselves, and more importantly, if you're a leader, if you don't look after your people and your team, you will find that burnout, I even think some PTSD is going to hit us next year. Stress levels are through the roof and there's going to be burnout. I'm nervous that people will survive COVID and then have heart attacks and cancers and other stress-related illnesses hitting them. We need to find our COVID pace. That doesn't mean sit down and do nothing. That doesn't mean get lazy. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying we've got to pace ourselves properly because we're in for a long haul of disruption here. Now, the third thing that I think that we need to do is we need to build adaptability into our DNA. One of the reasons we are running too fast at the moment, that we're spinning our wheels with all the stress and flurry of activity that's taking the energy out of us, is because I think that too many of us are just trying to do more of what we've always done. We don't really know what to do in this COVID crazy world. So we have more meetings, more emails, more. But maybe we don't need more. Maybe we need different. Maybe we need better. Now, I'm sure you've heard of Charles Darwin, right? Founder of the theory of evolution. And Charles Darwin is famous, I suppose, most famous for this saying, right? The survival of the? Exactly. You probably said fittest, right? Because that's what your science and biology teacher at school told you, except that's wrong. That's not what he said. In fact, I'd argue he'd said almost exactly the opposite. Have a look at what he actually said from his book, Origin of Species, that it's not the most intelligent or the strongest or the sexiest or the fittest that survives, but the organism that is most responsive to change. To put it in a word, the organism that is most adaptable is the one that survives. And that, I suppose, makes sense. We need to learn to be more adaptable. When the situation around us changes, we have to change our plans. But here's the point I'm trying to make. So we don't just change our plans by going through another change management process to find a new plan that we then stick to. I think that what COVID is teaching us is that we actually need adaptability in our DNA. We need to learn how to be more responsive, how to change. Now, this isn't a training course, and I need to start wrapping up this presentation anyway. But let me just give you 2 or 3 things that I think are useful without going into the detail. Adaptable organizations, adaptive systems, are those that distribute decision making. In old school, traditional organizations, more hierarchical structures are in place. And those systems work well when everybody in the system knows exactly what has to be done, when the situation, the circumstances around us are not changing, when the job to be done is clearly well defined, and when the best version of success is that you keep doing what you've always done in exactly the same way as you've always done it. In other words, in a McDonald's outlet, where we want a burger made in exactly the same way, to exactly the same specifications, exactly the same every time, well, then a hierarchical system works. I don't need people on the front line to be adapting, changing, thinking. But if that's not the environment we are living in at the moment, if we are living in this VUCA world, right? Volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, if that's the world we're living in, well, then we need a different decision-making system. We, in fact, need authority and responsibility more closely aligned. See, here's the problem. We get people on the front line of our businesses, the people who connect to our clients and our users and the front line. They're the people who actually know what's going on. They're the people who've got all the information that we need. But in a hierarchical system, information flows to where the authority is. In an adaptive system, authority flows to where the information is. And we need to find ways to make sure that we give more authority to the people who have the responsibility to do things. Maybe let me give you an example to help you understand this. Let's say during COVID, a company had to send their salespeople out to their main customers to say, we know it's not business as usual. How can we help you? Do you need more of our product quicker? Do you need less of our product slower? Do you need different packaging? Do you need a price adjustment? Do the terms and conditions need to change? So the salesperson, the business development manager, whatever language is used, they have the conversation with the client. They understand the client's needs. But can they actually make the changes that the client is requesting? Probably not. The bigger the organization, the more centrally controlled, the more likely they've got to go back to a sales committee meeting where a sales manager listens to what they ask. That sales manager might have to go to an executive to get approval. Legal and compliance want to get involved to make sure that the T's and C's are right. Then marketing wants to get involved to put it on the right letterhead. And finally, we get to take back to the salesperson and say, here, take this to the client. It might have taken too long, and it might not quite be what the client wants, because the person with responsibility, the salesperson, doesn't actually have the authority to do anything about it. Now, of course, this is not an easy thing to fix. I'm not saying you just clap your hands and then you can fix it. This is a few months, maybe even a year or two culture change project, but I'm suggesting it's the right things to think about. One more thing to suggest, and then I'm nearly done, and that is that I think adaptive organizations are very good at experimenting. They try things, not big things that will burn the place down and blow everything up if it doesn't work, but there's a culture of giving it a go. You've got to reduce the experimental risk to make sure that you're not wasting money, wasting time, wasting resources. You try something, if it doesn't work, you quickly learn the lesson, you share that lesson with everybody, you try something else, but there's this culture of experimentation, quick learning, and asking great questions like what if, why not, and why do we do it this way? Those are just a few examples of what I mean by building adaptability into your DNA. And that leads to my final point that I think we should all be doing, and that is that I believe we need to be reimagining our organizations, our systems, our lives, and our careers. You see, if we can't just grit our teeth and get through to the end of this small disruption and then everything will be fine again, and if it's not a great idea to go back to the way things were, and there's a lot of people using this language, I wish we could just get back to normal, oh, I wish we could just get back to the way things were. I don't think that that's the right approach. I actually think that COVID is a gift, and maybe that's too big a concept. It's an invitation, at least, an opportunity to reimagine. Let me use the office as an example here. I'm speaking to people and saying, would you like to go back to work, back to the office, and get out of your home? And a lot of people kind of saying, yes, can't wait to get back to the office. So I ask them, I say, well, what are you missing most about the not being at the office? And they kind of get this hazy view in their eyes, and they go, if I just want to be with people again where I can walk over, have a chat, deal with an issue quickly. And then I ask one further question. I say, is that what your office was really like? And then I realize that people have romanticized what the office was for them. The office was never like that. The aircon was always too hot or too cold and too noisy at the same time. Your colleagues were not just beautiful people you could go and have a chat with. They were irritating and disruptive, especially the ones that walked over to your desk all the time asking questions and chatting. I know we're missing some things, but here's my point. Why don't we then have a conversation with ourselves and our team and say, what are we all really missing about the office, about meetings, about life as we knew it? And instead of just going back as soon as we can to how things were, how about we be deliberate and conscious and intentional about building this picture that we have in our minds, building this thing that we want? In other words, how about reimagining? Maybe let me put it this way for the visual learners, maybe this will help you. Let's say I asked you to brainstorm how to improve a caterpillar. And I put you into groups and I said, improve this caterpillar for me. If you were a caterpillar, you might say, well, Graeme, I'm tired of being eaten by birds. Please make me smaller, less colorful, faster, leaner, meaner. That'd be an improvement. Thanks. Maybe you're an artist and you say, no, I love taking photographs. Look at that beautiful photograph. Make the caterpillars bigger, huge. Make them lovely and colorful and bold, so we can take great art photographs of them, and that would be an improvement. Some of you are ahead of me though, aren't you? Because the best improvement you can make to a caterpillar is a butterfly. Yeah. Caterpillars turn into butterflies, and that's how to improve them the most. You see, here's the point. I think too many of us are trying to imagine, trying to think of how we can do what we've always done, but just slightly better, slightly faster, maybe a bit cheaper. And that's what we think improvement is. And that is an improvement. But I believe that COVID has given us an opportunity to do much more than that. An opportunity to discover a butterfly. So yes, we have a crisis to deal with, and that's your first task, get through the crisis. But I think that our COVID crisis is a gift, an invitation, an opportunity to find the COVID pace. And the COVID pace includes learning to be more adaptable. We've been forced to be adaptable, and we're getting there, we're surviving, right? This year's never going to be on anybody's list of favorite years ever, but it's probably better than we might have guessed we'd be if we knew what was coming. We're getting there. We've been forced to adapt, and we are adapting. Let's be more intentional and deliberate about learning the skills of adaptation, even, dare I say, embracing the thrill, the fun, the joy even of adapting and becoming more adaptable. Let us reimagine what the future could be. So that's what I think we need to be doing. That's what I think 2021 needs to be about. And as you make plans for the next year, as you look ahead, please don't just get sucked into tactical plans, just delivering on your objectives that were supposed to be in place, of trying to just find some sense of how things used to be. Please look at all four of these things. Take this seriously as a leader. Help your team to think about this and go through the same thought process I've taken you through in this keynote presentation. Go through that with your team so that you set yourself up not just to survive COVID, but to thrive in all of the disruptions that are coming our way in the rest of the 2020s. If you'd like more information, if you'd like to contact me, here's how to go about doing it. I highly recommend my YouTube channel where our team puts up a new video every other day. That's short little insights that you can share with your team that will help you to think about this stuff. And yeah, if you have any questions, don't forget you can put them into the chat box and I'll take them live after the next presenters, or you can contact me directly and we can pick up a conversation there. I wish you all the best of success for what's left of this year and everything that lies ahead in 2021 and the rest of this crazy VUCA decade. Thank you.